Okay, we will go ahead and get started. Yeah, thanks all for being here. We're looking forward to a wonderful conversation today. My name is Stuart Hariyama, and I am an events manager at Fourth. And for those who don't know Fourth, we are a nonprofit promoting equitable access to electric transportation. And we work nationally, but are proudly based in Portland, Oregon, and have a long history of working with Pacific Northwest utilities, which is what brings us here today. This is part of a series that we're doing as part of our backstop aggregator work with the states of Washington and Oregon to bring utilities together and their partners to talk about how are we electrifying transportation and how are utilities helping drive this? What are obstacles that they're facing? And what are resources that folks can offer and organizations can offer? So this is a follow-up to a conversation we had in November um, with utilities. And this particular conversation is looking at what are the resources? What are financial resources that utilities can access, as well as resources from their nonprofit partners. A little housekeeping. You all are welcome to post questions directly in the chat, and we will try to get to them in the discussion portion of the roundtable. And without further ado, I will pass it over to my colleague Akhila Suri, who is our senior program manager, to get us going. Akhila?
Yeah. Thanks, Stuart, for setting us up and getting us all organized for today. And welcome to everyone joining us, seeing some introductions popping in the chat. So keep that coming. Really excited to have you all with us here today. My name is Akhila Suri. I'm a senior program manager at Fourth. I lead Fourth's work as the backstop aggregator to the states of Washington and Oregon under the Washington Clean Fuel Standard and the Oregon Clean Fuels Program. So over here at Fourth, we manage a wide portfolio of transportation electrification programs in both states as part of these portfolios. And we also work closely with utilities to advance transportation electrification. Side note, you'll hear me refer to this as TE a lot today, so heads up on that. So as Stuart mentioned, today's discussion builds on our November meeting with utilities about the current state of transportation electrification in the Pacific Northwest. And we want to use this discussion to focus on programs, strategies, tools to support utilities as they advance this work. But before we really dive into it, I think it would be good for us to back up a little bit and talk about why are we even discussing this today, right? Utilities sit at the center of TE. They lead the charge on infrastructure, reliability, customer engagement. At the same time, they're doing this in a year that has been fairly disruptive, right? We're seeing a rapidly evolving TE landscape. We're seeing funding shifts, regulatory changes, all while electricity demand is increasing on the side. So it's clear that utilities are navigating challenges and opportunities at the same time. And that's really the context for this webinar series. We wanted to create that space to understand how utilities are navigating these pressures and where the next opportunities could emerge. In the part one of the webinar series that we had last month, some themes that really stood out from our conversations with utilities were reliability, resilience, affordability, meeting customer needs. These continue to anchor decision making for utilities. We heard from utilities that planning is challenging because load is coming from multiple directions. Visibility into what that load looks like can be a little limited. We also spoke about how TE looks really different in different contexts. It's not a one-size-fits-all situation. And also acknowledging the reality that there are real capacity constraints that utilities face in terms of staff time, technical bandwidth, available to really shape the pace of this work moving forward. But while we spoke about that, we also discussed several opportunities, right? We spoke about how TE can help improve system visibility, create options to shape load more effectively. We spoke about how there are non-ratepayer funding sources like the Clean Fuels program that we'll hear about in a bit as well, that have been helpful in creating that space to pilot these programs while protecting affordability. We also spoke about how early TE efforts offer a really practical way to test some of these, charging, managed charging, flexible load planning approaches that supports like a longer term system performance. And we also discussed how TE can be tailored to local customer needs and cost sensitivities while allowing utilities to design strategies that match their communities. So that really brings us to, today's session that, that is titled like, where do we go from here? What's next? Like, where do we, what's the next step? So today's session builds on that foundation. And I'm so excited to have a fabulous panel of speakers from across the ecosystem who can share more on practical steps that utilities can take to strategically integrate EE in their work in a way that, their grid needs, customer needs, all of that is supported. So like Stuart said, the way this webinar will work today is that in the first half, we'll hear from each of our speakers on their perspectives, and then we'll roll into a discussion. So feel free to keep dropping your questions in the chat. We want to be able to address those and discuss those with our speakers. And we do want to keep this interactive and conversational. I want to move to introducing our panelists. And like I said, very excited to have them on board. And I'm going to request that our speakers turn on their webcams one by one as I introduce you. So hey there, welcome Abbey. Abbey is Abbey Brown, technical lead for the Clean Fuel Standard at the Washington Department of Ecology. Abbey has spent her career working on climate, energy, and air quality policy for governments and nonprofits in New York, DC, and her home state of Washington. So excited to have you here, Abbey. Bill Peters, Clean Fuels Programs Lead, Oregon Department of Environmental Quality. Bill has been super instrumental in shaping and leading the Oregon CFP, and we're excited to hear about lessons learned and opportunities there. Chad Woodward. Hey there, Chad. Chad is a climate and energy analyst at the city of Ashland, working within the electric department. In this role, he focuses on the city's efforts to meet the goals outlined in the city's climate and energy action plan. And a lot of his work includes developing and managing incentive rebate programs to encourage residents to adopt energy efficient technologies, including EVs. Jack McGrew, development manager at Fourth. Jack primarily works with our access to charging team and leads a lot of our utility work within those charging programs. So excited to have you here, Jack. And John Jans. John is the Chief Executive Officer at Gradient Exergy. John is an industry expert in TE and responsible clean energy solutions and has deep expertise and experience in providing TE assistance to rural utilities and the communities throughout the US. So thank you all speakers for joining us today. I'm really excited to get started. And something we really like to do here at Fourth is kick off with an icebreaker to give our folks an opportunity to know you all a little better. So, and as I ask this question, I welcome our audience to also feel free to chime in by responding in the chat. So my question for you all is, are you ready? What is one TE trend or opportunity that you're personally excited about moving into in 2026? So one TE trend or opportunity you're personally excited about heading into 2026. And maybe we can take this in alphabetical order to keep things simple. So maybe Abbey, we can start off with you, and then Bill, Chad, Jack, John.
Sure. Thanks, Akhila. I think there is great opportunity to make strides in the public transit space, in the electrified public transit space. We just recently adopted a rule in Washington that made some tweaks to the methodology for how we calculate credits for fixed guideway, which is for example, the ever expanding light rail system in Washington. And so that can generate more credits and therefore kind of get that virtuous cycle of investment going. So I think there's more opportunities to do things like that to better support electrified public transit in the year ahead.
Thanks, Abbey. Bill, I think you may be muted. Yeah.
There we go. Abbey came at this from the policy side. I'll come at this from the consumer side. I'm excited that we're getting more standardization around a charging standard, so I don't have to pay as much attention to what plugs are available at the charging stations when I'm driving around. Yeah, a little bit less broad brush as Abbey, her policy base, but just a little bit less of a headache for getting more consumers to understand it and also just have it be more interoperable so we don't have to keep a bunch of adapters, like we do for like USB cables or something.
Yeah, I hear you, Bill. Chad?
Well, I wish I had started my name with an A, so I could have gone ahead of Bill because the perception of range anxiety is what I had written down in advance of this. And it's that confluence of different factors, both real range anxiety because there's not enough chargers and the perception of it. So if we can have that standardization with the NACS chargers, or with NEVI program, having more chargers everywhere and access to the Tesla superchargers, I feel like 2026 is really poised to be that year where consumers can say, you know what, this is the year I do it.
Okay. Jack?
Yeah, hi, thanks. I think the biggest thing that I'm excited about right now, I'm just still very interested in ideas of like bi-directional capabilities, and sort of what we can do and the ways that, as consumers and customers, thinking about the grid can evolve and what it's capable of. I still remember a few years ago going to like a concert when I was down visiting in Austin that was like entirely powered right by like Ford F-150s. And I still think that that idea is really exciting and tells sort of a different story that really engages consumers. So as we kind of continue on and see like how workplace, how, time like sort of balance can evolve and change, I think that the idea of what we can do in the future is really exciting.
Thanks, Jack. More concerts powered by EVs. Yes, John.
I think I've been really excited by the growing number of used EVs because very few people in the world go out and buy new cars. And so most of the car market is used vehicles. And it's finally becoming more and more accessible to a much broader swath of people out there to fit various needs, right? Like you can find something for 2 or 3 grand that's maybe a lower range, older EV to like screw around town or something, all the way to, pickup trucks that are still relatively new, but, really increasing affordability compared to a new vehicle and everything in between. There's now electric SUVs that are 10 to 15 grand in the used market, maybe closer to 20, but it's really opening up possibilities for, places that EVs were kind of out of reach before, and for people, and I think that's also affecting people's attitudes towards EVs. The climate maybe hasn't been very hospitable towards EVs in the last year, but I think we're going to see some shifts under the surface here as more people are exposed to them and drive them and like, hey, these vehicles are awesome. So I'm really excited about that.
Thanks, Don. I have to say, I really appreciate the optimism across from charging to cars to used EVs and public transit. All right, thank you, our speakers participating. And we will move into presentations at this point, just to get us rolling. So to our panelists who are not speaking at the moment, feel free to turn off your webcams and I'll invite you back on when it's your turn. And Abby, we'll start with you. And yeah, let's hear from you. Kick us off on brief introduction to your work and how it supports transportation electrification for utilities.
Great, thank you. Let me go ahead and share. And would you just let me know if you're seeing the right screen, the presentation mode?
Yes, we're seeing the presentation mode.
Great. All right, I'm going to fly through a lot of information here. So after I go, I will make sure to drop a bunch of links in the chat, and include my contact information as well. So if anyone has more questions that I don't have time to cover, I'm more than happy to talk about it. So I'm going to cover the Clean Fuel Standard Program in Washington as a, next. There we go. Okay. As a brief primer on how the program works, producers and suppliers report quarterly based on fuel sold in Washington and the carbon intensity of that fuel. We assess life cycle greenhouse gas assessment emissions for every fuel brought into Washington. For electricity that is used as a transportation fuel to charge a vehicle or a vessel, that is set in Washington through what utilities report to our Department of Commerce through the annual fuel mix disclosure report. And then we calculate a specific carbon intensity score for each electric utility based on its generation mix. And then fuels generate either credits or deficits depending on that carbon intensity score. And at the end of each year, participants with deficits must purchase credits to come into compliance. And so that is what is driving money towards these low carbon fuels and incentivizing more low carbon fuels to be produced and either imported to Washington or generated in Washington. And the ultimate goal of the program in Washington is a 45% reduction in carbon intensity below 2017 levels by 2038. So there are three ways to generate credits in our program. The bread and butter is just credits, kind of the scenario I just described for fuel that is offered in the state. So just by supplying electricity through an EV charger or to for at-home EV charging, which I'll get into more in a moment, you can generate credits. There are also two smaller additional pools of credits as an opportunity. One is capacity credits, which is intended to balance out, it's intended to support the installation of infrastructure even when demand is low at the beginning when the infrastructure is installed. So you can generate fuel credits for the fuel that is actually dispensed from that DC fast charger, and then capacity credits for the unused capacity at that charger to help for a limited period of time to help recover some of the high upfront costs of installing an EV charger even when demand is low at the beginning. And then we also next year are going to be launching something called advanced credits, which is essentially an opportunity for public entities, including public utility districts, essentially can get an advance on the credits that they would generate for a project over time and get all of those credits at once to help recover their upfront investment costs more quickly. And I have more information about that I can share later. So for electric utilities are a huge player in these programs, huge players. So there's two main ways that utilities can generate credits in clean fuels programs. The first is residential EV charging. So electric utilities are not required to participate in the program. They can opt in to participate. And when they do, they notify us that they want to receive residential EV charging based credits. And we use a methodology using vehicle-specific data that we get from our Department of Licensing, and a methodology that is public on our website, and I can share that to essentially assign electric utilities credits for all the at-home EV charging that happens in their service territory twice a year without them having to report. So that's a huge, huge bucket of credit. We know that most people charge their EVs at home. So this is a huge bucket of credits that utilities can get with pretty minimal administrative effort. And then there's also an opportunity to generate credits for public workplace or fleet EV charging, what we call non-residential. And as long as the utility owns the EV charging station or has access to the data, they can report quarterly on the kilowatt hours of charging that occur and generate credits each quarter. So that's an option as well. And what that looks like in terms of actual participation, for the residential, as I mentioned, it's a little bit simpler. You register in the Clean Fuel Standard. You have to pay an annual participation fee. We set it each year based on our estimated budget for the coming year. So we haven't done that for 2026 yet. In 2025, the annual participation fee for credit generators like electric utilities was $373. And then, like I mentioned, without having to report, the utility receives residential EV charging credits twice a year. And those credits do not expire, so you can save them for whenever works best for you, and then monetize them for revenue. For non-residential charging, it's a similar: register in the CFS, pay an annual participation fee, and you only pay once per organization that's registered. I just have it twice here. You register the EV chargers, which is a one-time requirement to register the chargers so that we make sure we're not double counting chargers. And then you report the kilowatt hours of charging each quarter, and then you receive credits each quarter. So that is an option for utilities as well. And in terms of what we're seeing in the program, residential EV charging credits, like I mentioned, are a huge piece of this program. We've seen 1.97 million credits generated from at-home EV charging so far in the program, which is significant when you look at the whole swath of credits. Non-residential EV charging has been somewhat less, but there's still 3,500 registered chargers that are generating credits. And 280,000 credits, nothing to sniff at, even with our fairly low credit price right now of about $30. If those 280,000 credits were monetized, it would be over $8 million. So um, still a piece in the game. And then capacity credits for DC fast chargers. These are those infrastructure credits I was talking about. We have 63 approved sites, 201 approved chargers, and almost 4,500 credits generated so far, and those will continue generating credits. We started those a little bit later, and so those are gaining momentum as we go. And there's a lot more to cover, but in the interest of time, I will just say, please feel free to reach out to me if you have any interest in the Washington program or if you have more questions. The cfs@emy.wa.gov email is a great way to get a hold of me. And then if you are interested in getting updates as the program progresses, please sign up for a newsletter. And as Bill takes it over, or whoever is next after me, I will drop a bunch of links in the chat for your consideration. Thank you.
Thanks, Abby. And I think we have a few questions coming for you, so we'll address that in the Q&A. Hand it over to Bill.
All right, everyone. And it's nice that Abbey did all the ice breaking first. So the Clean Fields program here in Oregon is the older sister version of the Washington program that Abbey was just talking about. We've been around and been fully implemented since 2016. So we're about to tick over into our 10th full year of being implemented and in force. The programs are fairly identical, so I didn't bring a slide deck with me today, but a lot of what Abbey said around the Washington program is also true for Oregon. One area that is different is we don't have the capacity credits element. Our statute doesn't allow us to do that, so that would require legislative change. But generally, since the program's been in place and since our rulemaking back in 2016 and 2017 to designate the utilities as the generators of residential charging credits, we've seen millions and millions of dollars of value generated through the utilities selling off those credits and investing them into good TE efforts such as helping support electric school buses, helping support novel forms of EVs like electric farm tractors and garbage trucks, and a whole host of other programs. The main things I'll focus on today are some things we also have coming up. So first off, we're also working towards launching our advanced crediting program next year, probably close to the same time frame that Abbey was talking about, but maybe a little bit earlier. We're still working through the exact timing of that. Similar to the Washington program there, that's basically we're loaning credits against future charging is the basic idea there. So if you're buying a new electric truck and you know it's going to charge about 10,000 kilowatt hours a year, we'll give you 6 years worth of those credits up front, and then you just pay back the program by using the truck and then reporting that charging. We're hoping to get that launched, like I said, probably like May, June, July. It is limited to public fleets. That is something we've gotten some questions about, opening up to private fleets. Our main goal is, these are state-based programs. We need to make sure the electric vehicles stay in those states and are, used in reporting charging in our jurisdictions. So we went with the public ones first, just because that's a little bit easier for us to keep track of. But in a future rulemaking, we could definitely consider opening that up to private fleets. And we are going to have a future rulemaking quite soon. For those of you who didn't see, Oregon Governor Tina Kotek, just before Thanksgiving, ordered my agency to undertake a rulemaking to extend and increase the Clean Fuels Program's targets by up to at least 50% reduction by 2040. In order to hit those kind of really deep targets, we really do need a lot of transportation electrification to happen. There's other ways of generating credits, like Abby mentioned, with more low carbon biodiesel or ethanol or renewable diesel replacing the existing liquid fuels. But when you do the modeling, when you look at like where the amount of biofuels that we can get comes from, there's just not enough of it out there to really have a significant transition if we're not really decreasing the amount of liquid fuels we use by moving more transportation over to electric or hydrogen or something that's just not liquid fuel based. So transportation electrification is at the heart of these programs. They cannot be successful in the long run if we're not, reducing our demand for liquid fuels over time. And having the co-benefits there around, cleaning up air quality, some noise pollution benefits as well. So yeah, the executive order, once I finish talking, I'll throw a link to that in the chat. And in addition to the direction to us to increase the targets and look at transportation electrification and how we can advance equitable transportation electrification, the executive order and its accompanying materials direct my agency and our Public Utilities Commission to do a review of utility spending to, let's get the quote right here, ensure that clean fuels program credit revenues from the utilities are strategically invested to advance equitable transportation electrification. So we'll be working with our Public Utility Commission on that starting next year and taking a look at that. Obviously, as you all probably know better than I do, we have 30 odd utilities in Oregon. Only 2 of them, or 3 on the electric side, are regulated by the Utility Commission. We do have ongoing reporting requirements to the other utilities to let us know what they're doing with the credit revenues. And you'll be hearing from one of those utilities quite shortly, so I won't go into that too much. But our goal here is just to make sure that utilities are helping spur transportation electrification with the credit revenues, and that we're getting those dollars out the door, especially as we've had, fairly significant shifts at the federal level, and we're still trying to help make sure that transportation electrification really does keep moving over the next few years so that we can hit our long-term climate targets. For the rulemaking that we'll be launching next year, we are going to have a listening session in 2 weeks on Wednesday, December 17th. I'll throw a link to the Zoom registration in there. Our goal basically for that listening session is to talk through the EO direction, get some early feedback, and then also raise some policy issues that we need to deal with around renewable electricity accounting in the Clean Fuels program. We've got over 90% of the electricity reported in our program is either backed by renewable electricity certificates or is otherwise coming from basically BPA full requirement customer utilities. There's some carbon accounting challenges around the renewable electricity certificates that you all, or most representatives of electric utilities, may be very interested in. But given that I only have a few minutes here and anything around carbon accounting and electricity tends to take up the better part of an hour to get started on, I won't go into. But thanks, everyone.
Thanks, Bill. I think that was a great overview, and we'll have some time in the Q&A to kind of dig into those details. And it's a great segue to invite Chad to go next and share his perspective as a utility that has been leveraging some of these resources. Over to you, Chad.
Great. Just getting my screen up here, hopefully in presentation mode now. Do you see that?
Yes, perfect.
Okay, great. Yeah, so City of Ashland is one of the 13 municipally owned utilities in the state of Oregon, and we're a pretty small town. We have about 22,000 people and about 12,000 electric accounts. But we've been able to use this Clean Fuels program, I think, quite successfully. So these are the offerings that we currently have out there to our end-use customers. We have an EV incentive. I think we might still be the only EV incentive from a city in the state of Oregon at this point. What we just did have was a income qualified $2,000, a 2x multiplier for that if you do qualify as income qualified. And that harkens back to affordability of used EVs. We're going to see that, and we hope that this will help individuals leverage an EV purchase as a cheaper first option. We do offer free EV charging. We have 16 sites, and we also have fleet EV charging that we utilize that'll come into play on the next slide. We offer an EV charger incentive to business accounts for their customers or employees to utilize. And we also extend this to our occupancy taxpayers. So we have a lot of VRBOs, Airbnbs, bed and breakfasts in our town because we're kind of a tourist town with the Shakespeare Festival. And that can give up to $1,000 for the first charger and then $500 more per additional charger. The other project that we have, you can see the Fourth car in the photo. We've partnered with Fourth through grant funding to offer up a car share that's been in place for a couple of years. It's a great opportunity for individuals to take the car out, try EV for the first time, use it as their car in lieu of owning, or if they need a second car, that's another way to have that second car without actually having to have it 365 days a year. They can just use it a few hours a month if they want to, and they pay by the mile, by the hour of utilization. So it's very affordable for the end user. And then finally, in the electric transportation front, we do have e-bike incentives that we use clean fuel programs funds to pay for. And this can be another great car replacement for individuals or a second car replacement. Also, we're seeing more and more pop up on our streets every year. So how did we use clean fuel programs to make this happen? Well, first, it's similar to what Abbey mentioned about that base fee. We signed up for the program, and it's based on the registrations and the calculation on home charging. And this is 95% of the EV credit, or excuse me, the clean fuel credits that we get every year. Last year, we received about 3,500 credits, and the market can fluctuate quite a lot on this. We sold this fall for 140 a credit. Unfortunately, you have to pay attention to that, and you can't just sell it when you need the money. You have to pay attention and sell it when it's a good opportunity, because credits were all the way down to $25 or $30 at one point in time. But this is a great opportunity if you're an Oregon utility. Jump on it, get that money. And it pays for itself. That EV incentive that we have, it takes about 2.4 years of EV clean fuel credits to help pay off that $1,000 at that 140 rate. So after 2.5 years, you're making money on paying out for those incentives. You're increasing the number of registrations, and that's going to help you get future credits. Similar to the Washington program, we have expanded into credit generation with electric chargers. In fact, with our free charging, it's a better rate than with the clean fuel program credits than if we actually sold it. And it kind of comes out to a net neutral on cost when you factor in installing and purchasing the EV chargers over time. But I would say the biggest benefit is offering up some free charging or low cost charging makes people more inclined to buy that EV. It leads to an increase in EV adoption of your ratepayers, and then increased base funding allocation. And then finally, you're going to have actual kilowatt hour revenue once someone does have their home charger set up, level 2, level 1. I'm a big proponent of level 1. It works for a Nissan Leaf for daily use. And that can generate a couple $100 per car per year. So as you see your increase in registrations, you're going to see an increase in revenue and an increase in clean fuel program base credits. And they all feed into each other. The more EVs you have, the more base credits you have, the more revenue you have, and it just starts to snowball in this really positive manner, moving things forward. All right. As far as from a utility perspective, administering the program, it's pretty straightforward. It's similar to what Abbey had stated. We are doing our annual report, our quarterly reports for those level 2 chargers. We also want to know how much impact this has. So we track our registrations. This is our percent of registrations in the city over the last number of years, from under 1% in 2018 to over 5.5% this year. And then I did create a metric to account for how much emissions reductions BEVs and PHEVs have based on a standardized number and average miles per gallon. So we can see our numbers going down. We can track progress. We can demonstrate to the public that we're working on meeting our climate targets. And in the sake of time, I'll leave it there. And I've done a brief forecast, real basic. Your city's or utility area's vehicle miles traveled divided by miles per gallon times 33.41 is how many kilowatt hours we'll need by 2050 to power RVs. It gives you a real crude look, but we know it's going to be a much bigger slice of the pie. But honestly, EVs will use less electricity than my population forecasts and conversions from natural gas to electricity. So it's probably third in the ranking of what we need to look out for in the future. And I'll stop there.
Thanks, Dad. This is great. And I'm sure we'll have time to dig into this even more detail in the questions. Okay, over to you, Jack, and then we'll move to you, John. My request is to kind of move through the slides a little quickly so that we're able to keep some time for the questions. So if you see me come on screen, that's your cue to quickly wrap up.
For sure. I'll be cognizant of time, I promise. Thank you, Akhila, and thank you, everyone. My name is Jack McGrew. I am a business development manager here at Fourth. I work primarily with the access to charging team, like I said, but we're doing a lot of utilities work, and that's sort of what I'm here to talk about today. Our focus areas, some of you may be familiar, but we're really kind of going in three different primary modes, right? And that's access to electric cars, right? Vehicles, how do we get these into people's hands? Access to charging programs and making sure that that's the easiest way possible. And then access to emerging modes, which are things like micromobility and sort of e-farm equipment, exciting opportunities like that. For our access to charging, this includes a lot of different things. Our ethos is we want to make it as easy to charge as it is to park, right? And so this is including a lot of different sort of electrification efforts we have with like multifamily housing charging, workplace charging programs, different community engagement, and sort of like education stuff as well. Here at Fourth, we have sort of a technical expertise and a TA approach that we use to apply to a lot of these programs. We have really good in-house experts for sort of TE, and then we've also worked on like sort of TA projects with Oregon DOT, DOE, Washington Department of Transportation, lots of folks in the Pacific Northwest. We're kind of building this in concert with our community engagement and education models to make sure that it's sort of a holistic picture. Something you'll hear me talk about constantly, right, as a BDM person is like, I am a partnership guy, right? I think about how the most effective way we can do this is with everybody sort of moving in the same way. And so that's a lot of what our programs are doing. Some of the stuff that I want to highlight, again, just really quick, high level. Our Charge at Home program, our multifamily housing charging program, is working to expand access to electric vehicle charging at multifamily housing properties. We have this great website. I'll put it in the chat after I'm done yapping at you. But that's we have some really cool things that we use in there. This is a national thing, but we have like an EV charging project builder where different folks can kind of go in and plug in their specifications, and with our in-house expertise, get sort of reports on what they need to do to prepare, recommendations, all third party like unbiased recommendations from the sort. This is stuff that is available to anyone right now, but we also have been working with utilities in a bunch of different spots to sort of white label this project and make sure that we can sort of apply it specifically to different utility service areas, make sure that it's the most impactful and useful for a customer base and sort of tailored to that. We've seen really good numbers with this so far. As we all know, this is important because 80% of charging happens at home, right? But then additionally, this launched in August, got some pretty good feedback right away with our consultation specific part of the charge at home. And since this is actually a little out of date. We've had over 60 intakes from multifamily decision makers. And that's properties that range, right? So anything as small as 3 to as large as 366. A lot of condo HOAs, but also residents directly, and this is a variety of income levels we're seeing this at. Similar efforts that we're sort of looking to do would be like workplace charging. And as we know, workplace charging, if you have that available, you're 6 times more likely to purchase an EV. We see this as a huge driver in the electrification sort of movement, really important for utilities from that perspective. And so Fourth works on the eval certification, which is sort of like a lead similar program to get workplaces certified as, clean commuting sort of beneficial workplace charging. I'll speed it up. So we also do access to electric vehicles, right? We talked about a little bit of this with like City of Ashland. Really good way to get this into people's hands and get partners to experience driving pretty quickly. We've had good experiences with that, as well as some of our electric mobility efforts. E-bikes in Oregon, we've had really good luck with like bike share systems, different sort of lending libraries, things like this. And then our e-farm equipment, we're seeing this as like we're doing some pretty cool projects here. We have a multi-partner initiative to expand benefits of electrification through a bunch of different folks. This has been really helpful for like, say, like rural utilities. In Washington, we're doing a 2-year project funded by Puget Sound Energy for outreach and establishing a lending library. And we found that to be like a really useful way for rural utilities to get plugged again and sort of encourage it where there's sort of creative ways of thinking about it. So again, let me stop there. Hopefully the breeze worked and I didn't take up too much time, but thank you so much. Looking forward to answering questions.
Thank you, Jack. And over to you, John.
Hey, great to see everybody here. It's good to see some familiar faces and names. For those who don't know me, I'm John Jantz. Been working with rural utilities for a good number of years. Um, a little bit about Gradient. Uh, we work to basically help communities become more resilient. And the way EVs fit into that is I think that they're a key piece of the puzzle to adding resiliency to communities. Worked on some projects with other folks on this call to, create microgrids in rural communities where school buses can be a part of that. I think EVs themselves can offer a lot, not just in reducing peak, but keeping costs low and all the things that the utilities really care about. EVs can be a part of that solution if we're proactive about it. If not, there could be some negatives. So um, I think the exciting thing about this call is talking about the Clean Fuels program is kind of a ray of sunshine in, let's be real, this industry's taken a lot of hits this year, and it's been kind of the opposite of sunshine and rainbows in a lot of ways. A lot of federal funding's gone away. Just there's been a general pullback across the industry, and we've seen that like in the utility space. And you know, that can be disheartening at times for those of us who are really excited to see this industry grow. And I still truly believe this is the future. And speed bumps happen, right? Like there's cycles in any industry, but I think we're going to continue seeing growth. And um, a lot of this is how can we prepare for the future, right? I think the mood amongst utilities is to become more cautious amongst an industry that's already, by nature, quite cautious. But that doesn't have to be a bad thing. And I think we can think of this of how do we prepare and, turn EVs, leverage like the great things that EVs offer while mitigating like any downsides that they might have. Um, and so the Clean Fuels program is a great way to do that in Oregon and Washington here, where can really put these credits to work. And as others mentioned, the snowball effect that can really accelerate like what we do. Um, and because the sooner you have more EVs on your system, the more money you're generating, and the more you can invest to do that to help reduce rates and increase system reliability. So some of the things we offer, we're working with Fourth and Washington Department of Ecology as a backstop aggregator. So for all utilities that haven't opted into the program, that money goes to fund this work where we assist all of you out there, these utilities who haven't opted in, and provide support. And I think that comes in a number of like really vital ways. Of one is figuring out what your needs are, helping you navigate this space, and this world's changing really quickly. Like, what's the best thing to be doing right now? How to be making investments. And I think another way is supporting conversations amongst utilities like this call, and we're also working in Washington on peer-to-peer groups where it's just utilities meeting with other utilities and learning from one another. I think there's a big richness in that. And then we also offer technical support in a number of different ways. And I think one of them, that's Chad brought up earlier is like, where do we have EVs in our system? How many EVs are there, and what are their projections? And that might sound really simple, but it can be a little tricky to like get at that data at times. And I think it's often underestimated how many EVs are on a utility system. So, and then from there, looking at ways to manage EVs from the get-go, and like how can demand response really help mitigate peak. And a lot of utilities are really concerned about their rates going up, and certainly don't want to raise rates as consumer-owned utilities. It's probably the number one driver in looking towards the future. So looking at rate design that supports EVs in ways and helps keeps rates low. So and all this ties into how can clean fuels funding be used really effectively. And part of looking at the future is what fleets do you have in your service territory right now that are ICE vehicles? Because it's a pretty compelling case for those vehicles to make the switch to electric. How can you prepare for that? So that's all I got. Here's our contact info. We're happy to help support you through this work and look forward to talking to you all more. Thanks.
Thanks, John. Appreciate it. And thanks to all our panelists. And I'm going to invite our panelists to come off mute and join us back on and turn their cameras on, join us back. And to our audience, feel free to drop questions in the chat. We're going to make sure we get through most of them. And since we're running a little tight on time, I'm going to jump right in. And something we heard a lot today is about there's resources available, there is an acknowledgement of where utilities are at, and there are utilities that are using these resources and and starting with these programs. So having sort of acknowledged all of this and acknowledging that utilities in the region aren't starting from scratch right now, they're balancing quite a bit. What if utilities need to think about transportation electrification? How can it be structured in a way that implementing TE strategies reinforces their priorities of affordability, reliability, acknowledges the limited constraints instead of adding more strain? And maybe, Chad, you can take this first to kind of speak from your experience, and then Abbey, Bill, Jack, John.
Yeah, it's a great question. I mean, that's, costs are always, I think, number one in people's minds. But I think my thought at this point in time is that we are a ways off. When I showed my graph of EV adoption, it's not going to be that linear curve. It's going to be more of a S curve. I think we have time. We're going to have time to figure out the issues. We shouldn't worry about load management. We have a lot of space in our grid to pull things through. It's time of use, and having time of use charges in the future, I think will be really beneficial to how we can do this. EVs are the one area that we can influence people's needs. We can't change population growth, and we can't change when people need to heat and cool their homes, but we can influence when they charge their car, and they have flexibility on that front. So first get the cars out there and we'll figure out the rest.
Yeah, I think in the most basic sense, something that you mentioned at the top, Akhila, is that for the clean fuels programs, especially if you're participating on the residential EV charging credits and you're getting those credits without having to report, that's essentially free money in your pocket that then is a tool in your toolbox without having to impact ratepayers. So that to me is just the Clean Fuel Standard, Clean Fuels Program are not going to solve all problems related to TE, but I think we can be a really powerful tool in the toolbox for exactly that reason.
Yeah, especially where we're helping buy down the initial cost of those vehicles, it can be helpful, especially for the people paying the rates. I was on a call yesterday with some fleets in one of the school districts that runs a mix of diesel, propane, and electric school buses, noted that like the electrics come in cheapest out of the three of those, and they have operating costs of I think it was about 68 cents a mile versus propane that was up around 90, and diesel that was like 110, and a dollar per mile. So, it can save those fleets once they figured it out. I mean, I think it's also with school buses, those are a great candidate too, because they can do level 2 charging overnight. They do drive a bunch, but they don't drive super long distances, and they don't need to fast charge that much. So it makes it a nice, easy candidate for electrification for those districts.
Yeah, hopping on that in true fourth form, I have to talk about education here. I think this is like a huge piece of it, right? And also sort of education in the context of customers and consumers and designing programs around customer behavior, right? So like if they know what this can look like and we're kind of changing the way people think about it and educating there, then we're really seeing great opportunities, right? And like so if customers are charging at the right time and they understand that, then it's a grid asset, right? It's not a liability. And making sure that we're kind of slotting in to educate that piece is hugely important towards the transition writ large.
yeah, I would just echo that and what Chad said is like, you know, this isn't happening overnight. It's a decades long process, and preparing now and help that customer behavior that helps customers, right? That can be a win-win for the utility customers and the population at large is really important. And yeah, simple things like rate structures, it can really do a lot and help move that behavior amongst a number of other things.
Thanks, Ron. And that's a good point. And, a lot of this also comes down to how utilities can resource this work, right? And we heard a lot about funding from the clean fuel standpoint and the value of that to pilot programs in territories where we're not yet as sure what the rate of adoption is, or you're sort of watching where things go. I'm curious what other resources are out there that utilities can tap into to shape this phase of their work, whatever that may look like for each utility. If you want to jump into it, Bill, I see you have some thoughts there.
I mean, I think for the utilities I've talked to over time, right? Like it does tend to be like a mix of things. And I think that the what I've been in my job long enough that I mostly try and think about what other people's problems are, not mine, because that's usually where they're coming from in the conversation. And with utilities, right? You're dealing with a lot of things around the transition to a lower carbon grid, transmission planning taking forever and then another forever to get done. So, I think in terms of, resources and what we've tried to do from the program is just be really clear about what we know, what our projections are in terms of EV growth, what we're working on in terms of our regulatory programs around promoting or acquiring EVs and that transition, and just trying to make it as predictable as we can so it can slot into utility planning efforts and can be, predictable addition of load to the grid, and everyone's able to plan for it and understand where they might need update substations or have, at the residential scale, like some changes to, how many transformers are and all that.
I can hop in if that's cool. Putting on my development hat, right? This is something that I think about a lot, is like funding and the way that we see it the most effectively working. One of the things that we see is it's working best when it's braided, right? Like, so clean fuels dollars can go further when combined with like state grants, with local partnerships. This is something when folks have different buy-in, like, and again, partnerships is like my big buzzword of the day, as you all know. But we're seeing that things can really be pushed further and we can really see uh, valuable sort of proof of concept from that. We've had really, really good luck with small pilot programs that then kind of build momentum and you can kind of see the proof in the pudding. And so being able to sort of get that proof and then sort of utilize that to gain more funding in like sort of the context of partnerships for my money is one of the most useful ways to approach this.
Thanks, Jack. And just chat to just kind of throw this at you, like what has been useful to the city of Ashland as you sort of figured this, your own journey in this.
Yeah, I think the other source of funding is that grant funding that we've folded into the mix, and that helped bridge the gap on things like installing EV chargers, which then can generate more credits. And let's see, the car share was also grant funded, so two different state grants, the ODOT level 2 charger grants, and then the recent EECBG community block grants we used for both of those. And then we do have a climate plan, and we focus some of our city dollars on that for conservation efforts. So those are the three primary areas, but for sure, clean fuels is a big, big part, the biggest.
Also, just add something you said, Chad, that I think is a really great point, is that this is kind of a virtuous cycle of investment, that if you get a grant for, say, an electric school bus or to install EV charging infrastructure, or in Washington, you get Climate Commitment Act funding, et cetera, wherever the source is. If it's something that then goes on to generate clean fuel standard credits, clean fuels program credits, then that helps support the rest of that equipment or vehicle's useful life. That can cover the electricity use, the maintenance operations, things like that. So these things really work well in concert.
Yeah, the snowball effect can be pretty profound. I think for a lot of smaller, more rural utilities that are, more years behind, like where a city like Ashland is, or other utilities along the I-5 corridor, like sometimes knowing where to start is more difficult. And it seems like this is still a little ways off, and there's so many other fires to fight. So having this help, having technical assistance, and then learning from one another, learning from peers is really important.
Thanks, John. And thanks for mentioning that, because that's a great segue into my wrap-up question. Since we're almost at time here, knowing where to start is really challenging and important. So, in just a few words, and for all of you, if you had to give utilities one starting point for getting ahead on DE, something that's good for their grid, serves their priorities, keeps their customers, keeps them ready for what's coming up. I know there's been mention of heavy-duty trucking in the chat as well. What would that look like? And just a quick +1 question for Abbey and Milton in particular, because there's a question on the chat about what is meant by clean fuels. What is clean fuels? So you want to just address that along with where can utilities start?
That's a much longer conversation, but for the most basic sense is that for our program specifically, what that means is the life cycle greenhouse gas emissions for that fuel and its unique production process are below the required reduction each year. And that required reduction decreases each year. So the fuels that are generating credits should be getting cleaner and cleaner over time in order to keep generating credits. So it can mean a number of different fuels, but it also really depends on the fuel's production process. Some ethanols are above the standard, some are below. Some methane is going to be, biomethane is going to be way below. Some hydrogen is going to be above, some is below. So it really depends on how the fuel is produced, if it's produced with renewable electricity, things like that. For the on the electric utility side of thing, I think this was mentioned earlier, I think by Chad. Just if I could say anything, it would just be register in the program and start getting those base credits. You don't have to do much to get them, and they don't expire, so you don't have to necessarily do anything with them right away. So I would just encourage everyone to not be particularly intimidated by that process. There's not a lot required to get those credits or to sell them. You don't have to sell them. Of course, we want to encourage people to sell them in a timely manner, but not at the expense of not opting into the program in the first place. So I would just recommend that if you're at all interested, have a conversation with either me or Bill or our teams, scope out what it would look like, register in the program, start getting those credits as soon as you can. And then you can figure out how you build from there. If you want to be installing additional chargers, if you want to be partnering with others who are generating credits, whatever that, partnering with your local transit agency to start electrifying some of their transit, the school district with their buses. There's a lot you can do. But the first, I would say, just getting those residential EV charging credits then gives you a really, really strong foundation off of which to build, and is a pretty low barrier to entry. So that would be my encouragement.
Excellent, Bill.
I mean, Abbey basically stole everything I was going to say, but what I will say that is maybe a chance to ask for all of you too. So what has always been really helpful for us is the coordination and cooperation we've had from our utilities, and just learning from you as you work through, barriers buying EV in your communities, like things that come up. If you were trying to figure out how to do this as much as you guys all are, and figure out what is the most effective for this transition that we're all trying to help keep going. So, where you have lessons learned, where you have programs that are working, we want to hear about those. We want to understand better, what is and isn't working in all of the areas of our state. Because, what's going to work in Portland, it might be different in Ashland, it might be different in Bend, it might be different in Unity, and all the little small communities we have around the state. So we're really looking to hear from you and to get a better sense of, on the ground, what are the headaches, what is preventing, more DC fast chargers, what's preventing people from wanting to make that leap into their first EV or plug-in hybrid.
Yeah. Chad?
Yeah, it's obviously sign up. We've said that enough, but then it is going to depend on your community. What is the need? Are you trying to increase adoption? Are you very rural and don't have many DC fast chargers? So how do you first spend your first batch of money is going to be dictated by what you have going on. Maybe it's doing a grant match for a school bus. something like that. So see what your needs are and then figure it out. And like Abby mentioned, there's not a great hurry. Take your time and do what makes sense for your community.
Amazing. Jack, and then we'll wrap up with
Yeah,
John.
being real quick, I think leaning into the available support and resources that exist, this isn't something that you have to figure out entirely on your own, right? And with that, I'll do like a little plug that in 2026, like Fourth will be offering free like, technical assistance to utilities in our role as the backstop aggregator in Oregon and Washington. Feel free to reach out. We're here to support TE planning, outreach, education, strategy, program design, etc.
And John.
Yeah, gonna sound like a broken record here, but reaching out, building relationships. That's, when I talk to any other stakeholder, like a school district, a county, a tribe, for everyone else I talk to, it's like, hey, reach out to your utilities, build a relationship. And that's where it all starts. So I'd say the same on the other side of the coin.
All right. Well, thanks y'all for joining us. I'm going to quickly hand it back over to Stuart.
Thanks, Akhila, and thanks again to all of our wonderful panelists. Thank you for a rich conversation today. Obviously, we can only touch on the surface of many of these programs, so feel free to reach out to these panelists for more information. We'll also be sending a recap email with the slideshow presentations as well as recording and additional links. So hopefully you all will get all the information that you need and where to find more. Just want to plug, Fourth has an upcoming webinar in 2 weeks, sort of recapping, everything that's happened in 2025 in terms of electric transportation. It's been a busy and tumultuous year, but also looking towards 2026 and where we're going in our industry and how we can continue to move this forward. So thank you again for everyone joining this call. We hope you have a good rest of your day, and we'll hope to see you soon. Bye.
Bye. Thank you. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks all.